Yes.
Hello, this is Professor Dr. Deepika Srivastav from the English department. My lecture for today is on violence in literature, and it is meant for all university students as well as those preparing for NET and other competitive examination, because violence is evident in all literary genres, right from epics to present day postmodern literature. You have seen that all the narratives, all the epics, all the poems, dramas, they have traces of violence in some form or the other. So today I am taking up this lecture, Violence in Literature, and I will show you how violence is depicted in literature. This lecture of mine aims to look at various representations of violence, different ways of approaching violence, and the multiple ways in which writers utilize the theme in their works. People read literature because they want to understand their own experience and the experience of others. Literature contains much violence because violence reveals the underlying conflicts in all social relationships, and in literature also this is depicted. Violence is pervasive in literature because literary authors and their readers want to get at the inner core of human nature. To explain the significance of violence in particular works of literature, critics must analyze the interactions between human life history, specific cultural values, individual differences in vision. The omnipresence of violence is reflected through the following lines of the poem entitled Rumination by the renowned Indian poet K. N. Daruwala. I quote from his poem. I can smell violence in the air like the lash of coming rain. Mass hatreds drifting grey across the moon, it hovers brooding, poised like a cobra. The term violence originates from the Latin violentia, meaning vehemence, which in turn implies an intense force. Violence is akin to violate, and thus is suggestive of damage and destruction that would characterize a violent storm or a traumatic experience such as rape, terrorism, or war. Though the concept of violence has always intrigued philosophers and psychologists as well as literary artists, it is only in the 20th century that it has gained currency in most cultural discourses. Perhaps this is owing to the increase in the incidence of violence in the modern era, to the unprecedented carnage the world has witnessed in the course of the century, and to the emergence of crusaders of non-violence such as Gandhiji and Martin Luther King. Broadly speaking, racism, sexism, economic exploitation, ethnic and religious persecution are all possible sources of violence involving constraints that abuse people's psychology. Citing the mystery and mayhem it brings about, significant philosophical debates on violence include the French philosophers Georges Sorel's Reflection on Violence. In this text, Sorel worked with Karl Marx's ideas on the proletariat or the working class and their ability to overthrow the middle class. The political theorist Hannah Arendt's On Violence is another landmark treatise on 20th century apologists for violence. Drawing on notions of power developed by the French philosopher Michel Foucault, Newton Gower's essay, What Violence Is, includes covert, psychological, and institutional forms of violence in declaring any institution which systematically robs certain people of rightful option generally available to others does violence to those people. Obviously, thinkers differ in their approach to defining violence and continue to examine its manifestation in contemporary times. The problem of violence has also been of considerable interest to psychologists. Sigmund Freud was the first to diagnose the origins of neurosis, including violent behavior in human subjects. Owing to its omnipresence and the human mind's obsession with it, violence has had ubiquitous representation from cave paintings to contemporary television drama. Beginning with epic narratives like the Mahabharata, the Homeric verses, and Beowulf, among others, literature has always attempted to represent violence as a trope for relationships of power and domination. In many respects, Western literature, ranging from Sophocles' Oedipus the King to biblical stories of Cain and Abel, Dante's Inferno, William Shakespeare's King Lear, and Herman Melville's Moby Dick, seeks to define itself by the tragedy arising from human violence. For most 20th century artists, violence ranging from the destruction of large-scale warfare to individual crimes of murder, rape and abuse is an inevitable aspect of their visions. Unable to accept a fallen world, modernist writers often employ destructive violence as the central motive in their works. For instance, the poetry of Sylvia Plath and John Wayne attempts to discern the sources and effects of modern violence, culminating in anger, frustration, despair, and even suicide. For some modern poets, however, violence has provided an ironic source of creativity and change, a view articulated by William Butler Yeats in poems like The Second Coming and Easter 1960. Critics also emphasized the historical significance of violence in the period following World War II, when poets and novelists in the period of just after the World War, they bemoaned a world mired in conflict and in which aggression threatened to destroy human qualities. Racial violence is apparent in novels like Richard Wright's Native Son and Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eyes. The universality of women's experience of sexual violence has provided grounds for feminist contributions from writers such as Margaret Atwood and Joyce Carol Oates. Plagued by violence, the contemporary era views non-violence as a redeeming idea and the need of the hour. Though the history of non-violence as a religious or philosophical doctrine has been traced as far as the Chandogya Upanishad of ancient Hinduism, the Bible and the early Christian prophets, the advent of non-violence as a favored alternative position occurred in the recent past with Gandhiji's Satyagraha, campaigns for India's independence in the 1920s, and the struggle for racial justice in the United States during the 1960s. In many respects, 20th century literature defined itself by reflecting the prevalent violence of modern society, from the destruction of large-scale warfare to individual crimes of murder, rape, and abuse. Others have emphasized the historical significance of violence in the period following World War II, during which poets and novelists expressed the anxieties of a world that seemed incapable of peace and in which human aggression threatened to bring about global destruction. By the close of the 20th century, images of violence in all forms of media had become commonplace. Violence has provided an ironic source of creativity and change also, as the new and pure is brought forth from the ashes of destruction. A view articulated by W.V. Yeats in Easter 1916, a poem that envisions the birth of a terrible beauty through violent conflict. Modernist poetry, written between the two wars, was spearheaded by T.S. Eliot. This age was an age of violence, disintegration, anxiety, chaos in political, economic, cultural, moral, religious and domestic spheres of life. Eliot wrote poetry as a means of imposing order on society and tried to awaken the consciousness of his age to its situation. Eliot's early poetry is an octopussy of the modern city civilization which is ruthless and full of violent activities. In his poem titled The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Eliot represented the life of a modern man in the inferno of modern city civilization, like cribbed, cabined and confined. The most important of Eliot's works, The Wasteland, is a howl of despair, and the poem expresses the disillusionment of the post-war generation in Europe. Owen is indisputably the best poet to produce poetry during the First World War. He was killed in 1918. He saw war in its proper perspective and made it the subject of his poetry. His poetry deals with the truth as he found and experienced on the front. In his fragmentary preface to a volume of poems about war, Owen states firmly that he is not concerned with poetry, his subject is war and the pity of war. His war poems are famous for horrific imagery and vehement criticism of war and its aftermath. Owen presents a graphic picturization not of war but the casualty of war. I quote from his poem on war. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind, gas, quick boys, and ecstasy of fumbling fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling. Auden emerged on the literary scene in the third decade of the 20th century as a remarkable poet when England was plunged into ocean of despair and troubles. He became the champion of social justice and directed his poetry to change the social structure of society. In his poem September 1, 1939, Auden ponders over the violent atmosphere of World War II. I quote from this poem. I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid as the clever hopes expire of a low dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands to the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable ardor of death offends the September night. Yeats believed that the historical events of his day suggested profound and disturbing change. The impact of World War I was still being felt in every aspect of public and cultural life at the time the Second Coming was written. In this poem, violent imagery has been used. I quote from this poem. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. In literature as in life, violence reveals the underlying structure of human motives and passions. Violence has long occupied a prominent place in Western literature. Accounts of violence may be serious or satirical. They sometimes involve natural violence such as earthquakes, but usually describe human caused disaster such as war, torture, crime, and abuse. Two literary forms in which the earliest and most powerful treatments of violence appear are epics and dramas. Epics are long narrative poems. As you all know, they need to be read rather than acted. Since they are about a hero or heroic event or the founding of a nation, it is logical that violence is involved in the epic genre. The most important epic, of course, is Mahabharata, which is full of violence. Now we come to the novels. The Victorian novelists and novels are also full of violence. Let us take up a tale of two cities in which Charles Dickens, my favorite Victorian novelist, shows how violence can flourish due to the inequality seen in the lower classes. Throughout the novel, much, if not all of the violence is motivated by the poverty-stricken people. During this time, in France, much of the population was part of the Third Estate. These people had to make of what they had. So, when the French Revolution begins, its uprising is due to the vast wealth of the rich and the lack of money for the poor. Therefore, the oppression of the French people by the ruling class in the 18th century is an infamous time in history. Dickens highlights the principle that violence perpetuates even more violence until the sinister chain eventually exhausts itself. Similarly, Oliver Twist also focuses on the world of crime, and it shows how an innocent hero, Oliver, is lured to the world of crime by Fagin and his gang of robbers. Another great novelist, Louis Tolstoy, famous novel War and Peace, is concerned with both war and peace, violence and non-violence. Tolstoy was the father of the 20th century non-violence movement. Like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., Tolstoy too educated use of non-violent means of exacting change. His views evolved after witnessing the horror of war as a soldier in the Crimean War. Now let us come to India and Pakistan. A Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh, the famous novelist, is a brilliant and realistic story of political hatred, violence and of passions during the turbulent days that followed the partition of the British India. The novelist brings to the center stage violence on both sides of the border, manifested in ruthless destruction as well as the even impact of partition on the peace-loving Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs. Babsa Sidhwa's portrayal of violence that accompanied the partition is impartial and subjective. She blames both the communities for highlighting unbelievable atrocities of violence amongst Hindu, Muslims and Sikhs. Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man illustrates cases of public frenzy, communal hatred, exploitation of women and children, and large-scale violence. Two separate nations, India and Pakistan, were created in 1947 in the wake of communal violence. Sparks of brutality and violence were again ignited in 1992 with the demolition of the Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. Taslima Nasreen's Lajja, which was written in 1993, is set in the backdrop of the Babri Masjid demolition. I now bring the case of Jhumpa Lahiri, an Indian American author, and in her famous novel The Lowland, she describes perspectives of violence and revolution. A tragic novel set both in India and the United States, it explores the price of idealism and a love that cannot last long past death. Lahiri discusses Naxalite problem through her novel, in which the protagonist, being a college student, takes active part in Naxalite activities. Actually, Naxalite and Naxalwadi are generic terms used to refer to various militant communist groups operating in different parts of India under different organizational envelopes. They are usually referred to as the Maoists. The term Naxal derives from the name of a village, Naxalbari, in West Bengal, where the movement had its origin. Naxalites took over Jadavpur University and used the machine shop facilities to make pipe guns to attack the police. Their headquarters became Presidency College, Kolkata. The Naxalites found supporters among some of the educated elite, and Delhi's prestigious St. Stephen's College, alma mater of many contemporary Indian leaders and thinkers, became a hotbed of Naxalite activities. Similarly, Booker Prize winner Salman Rushdie's Shalimar the Clown takes up terrorism rampant in Kashmir. It shows how a young innocent lad, Shalimar, turns a terrorist. I take up another case, Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger, which throws light on violent methods to achieve fame. The protagonist, Balram, takes to violent methods to reach success. Arun Joshi's A Strange Case of Billy Biswas also shows how the protagonist meets a violent end. He is shot dead by a police officer. There are many other instances in novels showing cold-blood murder and violence. Violence aesthetics abound in literature works. A Rose for Emily, which was written in 1930, and Lord of the Flies, which was written in 1954, as the respective masterpieces of Faulkner and Golding, have long been studied by scholars in different times to understand their violent themes. The former describes women violence, while the latter introduces the violence of a group of boys. The Holocaust has been a common subject with American literary artists ranging from Sylvia Plath to Saul Bellow. Annie Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, which was written in 1947, is a significant Holocaust document. After taking up novels, let us briefly examine drama and how violence was a part of it through centuries. Elizabethan and Jacobean audiences reveled in shocking drama, illustrating violence, murder, and other forms of violent methods. Scenes of bloodshed were staged with maximum realism. Some of Shakespeare's most violent plays were by far his most popular plays during his lifetime and even after his death. Hamlet's father is poisoned with a potion so potent that it immediately causes bubbling scabs on his body. King Duncan is lured by Macbeth's castle to be slaughtered in his sleep. Some characters who meet their end violently are Brutus in Julius Caesar, Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra, Goneril in King Lear, Juliet and Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, Lady Macbeth in Macbeth, Ophelia in Hamlet, Othello in the famous tragic play Othello, etc. In Greek tragedy also, presentation of violence is so evident. Coming to George Bernard Shaw, His masterpiece, Arms and the Band, which you all have read, was set in the aftermath of the Serbo-Bulgarian War of 1885 and challenges romantic ideas about war and love. It is one of the most famous drama written by Shaw. Famous playwrights Tennessee Williams and New Line Vijay Tendulkar saw violence since their early lives, and therefore they depict it in their plays. And the plays are A Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and Tendulkar's The Vultures, Ghasi Ram Kotwal, etc. They all reveal different forms of violence. Animals are assigned a new line crucial role in them. Animal sounds create a violent atmosphere. New line violence is shown in the form of bloodshed. Men and women are the sufferers. In one New Line play, the convicts were roasted alive. The ideology of torture was a widely accepted means of stage aesthetics. This was only a brief introduction on violence in poetry, drama, and novels. Conflicts theorists hypothesize that crime stems from differences in economic wealth, clash of cultures, or from the outcome of symbolic and instrumental struggles over status, ideology, morality, religion, race, and ethnicity. The authors provide empirical evidence describing situations where words have the ability to be used as weapons to ambush, terrorize, wound, humiliate, and degrade, and thus should represent an assaultive form of speech that has the ability to inflict substantial psychological, social, material injuries without being as conspicuous as physical violence. With these words, I want to conclude my lecture, and before I end it, I would like to recite a poem which I have written on sexual molestation of the girl child, because girl abuse is the worst form of violence, as you know. The title of my poem is Save the Girl Child. I will recite my poem and will end my lecture by completing this poem. It is based on how a young girl was lured, then raped, and then murdered. And the name of the girl was unfortunately revealed. She was Asifa, a small child grazing her cattle in the valleys of Kashmir. I read out my poem. Asifa, Asifa, why were you born? Asifa, Asifa, why were you born? Weren't you safer in your mother's womb? If on earth you had to be deflowered and then murdered, even the devils in hell would have kept you safer. Asifa, Asifa, why were you not in school? A young girl grazing cows and sheep, you were lured by a few sweets. It was not your fault at all. After all, you were just a small child. Didn't even know what a rape was. Asifa, Asifa, now you are in a safe place. People around you were incapable, inefficient, couldn't take proper care of you, had no business to be your custodians. Take divine help, guard young dolls, so that another Asifa is not born again. With these moving lines, I end my lecture on violence in literature, with the hope that violence is eradicated from literature for all times to come, and that peace prevails in our universe. Thank you.